I want to give you just a tiny bit of background as to why this research and why Sami silver. I will tell you that back in 2021, I was approached by the video producer, Susan Tao from Twin Cities Public Television to do a very short segment on Norwegian jewelry. She was doing a series entitled Worn Within, which I encourage you to find online and view, which explored the costumes and adornment of various ethnic groups in and around the Twin Cities, to include the Somali, Azteca, Latina, Hmong, and also Scandinavian jewelry. So she did a very short segment on me about jewelry from my particular family land, which is in Hallingdal. And after the airing, we had a very interesting comment on Instagram from an artist in Minneapolis of Sami descent, who was very curious and wondered why we hadn't addressed Sami silver. And I thought that was a really good question. I myself, being a teacher of filigree jewelry and having taken classes in Roland to learn filigree work, I thought it was a really valid question, and also one which merited exploring. So that very same year, I applied for an American Scandinavian Foundation fellowship to travel to northern Norway and do some research in the field, because there's not a lot written about the history and the development of Sami silver in general. So that is the background, and we'll go to the next slide. And I have really decided to just sort of wow you with just the sheer beauty and magnitude of this particular craft, because it is, you may look at it and see that it's similar to things that you've seen in regional bunad or regional outfits throughout Norway and Scandinavia, but these are incredibly unique, complex, and very different in a lot of their design elements and aesthetic. So what you're looking at here is a bridal couple. This is a photograph that is from Yule's Silver Gallery, and we'll talk more about them later on in the talk. But this is an actual bridal party. So if you're familiar with Norwegian bridal traditions, you know that the bride is the queen for the day and is bedecked in as much silver that she can wear to show wealth, to protect her from the Huldra folk, from whisking her away from her groom, and then also to protect against any other sorts of ailments and that sort of thing. I want you to kind of remember this photo for later reference and note the beautiful belt that the groom is wearing at his waist there. And then also, too, on the woman's cap, she is wearing a bridal crown, which is a very distinctive style. And the other photographs, you can see variations of how much silver some of these brides are wearing. But let's go to the next slide. So when I first started my interest in this, I looked at these really large pins, which you can find online if you type in Sami silver. So you may see similarities of this, again, to Norwegian silver, but there are very different elements to these. This brooch is referred to as the rescue, and is associated with a lot of sun symbology. The Sami people themselves call themselves children of the sun. So if you look at the Sami flag, there is a kind of a representation of the sun symbol there. So there are a lot of sun symbol references to the silver itself. And this is one beautiful pin by a silversmith that we will discuss too as well in Kautokeino. But just for the sake of reference, if you are new to this topic, the Sami are the indigenous people of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and northern Russia. So a large majority of the Sami population live in northern Norway. So my area of study was limited to, but inclusive of, Alta, Karasjok, and Kautokeino. So that is a very northern Arctic circumpolar area. So let's go to the next slide. And I decided to make this trip in April, which was very close to the Easter festival, which is a big time of year in Sami culture. But we flew into Alta to the airport there and had some days that I wanted to spend because there's a beautiful museum there, the Alta Heritage Museum. And just to give you kind of an idea, if you have ever traveled there, the scenery is breathtaking and the landscape is unlike anything I've ever seen like in my life, all the different places that I have traveled. So this is just a very quick view from the back of the museum deck, overlooking the water and then also giving you a sense of the hillside there. But let's go to the next slide. And I was really super happy that we had a fantastic hotel room in Alta that our back window showed this beautiful church, which is the Church of the Aurora Borealis. And again, just to give you a sense of just the incredible scenery that is there, the mountains in the background. And this was the time of year also too, not a lot of light, but still really beautiful as you could get yourself out there and get your camera in the frigid air to get some photos. But so let's go to the next one. The Alta Heritage Museum is located just a few clicks away from downtown. And the reason I wanted to stop here is that this was my very first stop to actually look at an exhibition of some historical Sami silver pieces and then also some more contemporary exhibits that were going on there at the time. Now, the thing is that with the silver work, I stupidly, and I had the same approach when I was studying Norwegian filigree work, is that I thought I could just study the silver itself. And there is just no such thing. The silver is intrinsic to the folk and regional outfit, which is referred to as the gakti for the Sami, Northern Sami people. And you cannot separate the actual silver or any of the other adornments or accoutrements from the actual outfits. So what we have on the left is actually a really beautiful collar, which is wool and has these really beautiful brooches that border on like leaf shapes and then also silver ball shapes. And this is a little more recent sort of work, but on the right you can see, and I apologize for the glare on the glass here, you can see some sort of older belts, belts being an intrinsic part of adornment with the Sami gakti itself. And I want you to keep belts in the back of your mind because I have some interesting facts about that a little bit later in our talk. But go ahead and go to that next slide here. One of the perks of traveling when you're like are solely focused on trying to find out as much information about a particular topic is all the little side ventures that you're going to have pop up in front of you. And this is an artist who is exhibiting at the Alta Heritage Museum at the same time I was looking at pieces there, Jorunn Løkvold. And she is actually reviving a very old tradition called Clima or Glimmer. And what you see here are actually beautiful reindeer hide and wool belts. And if you can go to the next slide, I can show you a detail. And if you look at this detail, this is I'm not going to butcher this name here at the top, but it is referred to as Clima or Glimmer. These are very little tiny pieces of mica in those little openings there that look sort of translucent or milky. And this is something that is considered a very old technique, but one that is on the revival. So I had a great opportunity to see something like this where I was like, oh, so this is how like the whole, man loves anything that sparkles started, because this is something where if you're familiar with mica, it's a type of quartz that can come off in like very thin layers like potato chips. And this is a very ingenious and also unusually cool way of getting a little bit of sparkle into your textiles. So let's go to the next one here. We had some days in Alta while we were there that before we drove to Kautokeino. So Alta is on the coast and we would have to drive inland to the tundra. So we had a couple of days there. And before we left for our trip, I had done some research. And one of the things that was highly recommended to me to get like a very quick sort of immersive sense of Sami culture, especially regarding the reindeer herding, was to go to one of the sidas, which is a reindeer herding community. And there was one right outside of Alta that was started in 2002 by two couples who are generational reindeer herders. And they also had lots of people who had come through, including tourists, who wanted to know about Sami culture. So they felt that they would like to set up a compound where people could actually come and experience that, learn about the history, learn about their culture, their language. And so this is the Sami Asita outside of Alta. And the little wooden reindeers here you see are basically used for practice, for lassoing a reindeer to get them to do your bidding. And you'll see some traditional lavu in the background, these sorts of teepee-like structures. So let's go to the next slide here. And of course, you cannot go to this without them having you go on a reindeer ride. We had a really nice guide. His name was Jack, who is Sami and is someone who is working for this family. And I just will tell you right now, I know how we all love to think of like the reindeer as like warm, cuddly, and fuzzy. I had asked, should I pet them? He said, absolutely not. They are a wild animal. Do not. And they're very ornery. So I took his advice, and we had a really lovely day because there was no one else there except myself and my husband. And so we got like this really incredible 4-hour sort of immersion into them catching the reindeer, taking us on a sled ride. And if you go, the next slide will kind of show you a really beautiful, where this is all situated right outside of Alta. Again, just a breathtaking landscape. And if you look down into the lower left-hand corner there, you can see a structure which is actually a restaurant, but also part of a museum as well. So you get an introduction to the language, the actual reindeer herding culture there, and eat some traditional foods. And in the next slide, I think we are, I'm going into the lavu because they do love to have coffee and cake after being outside. And so we sat around in there for a little while and had some nice beverages, and then also talked a bit about the Sami culture. So I got a nice quiz, like, what do you know about the Sami culture? Why are you here? Are you Native American? They asked me. I'm like, no, but a very interesting question. So we learned a lot about the fact that there are very few traditional reindeer herders anymore, but all of the reindeer industry is controlled by the Sami people themselves. That is their prerogative at this point. So let's go to the next slide. And this is one of the owners of the Sita. This is, let's see here. Yeah, I'm in a Gore-Tex suit. This is great. This is part of the museum offering that they really like to have people come through, and they give a nice presentation about older Sami clothing, which of course would have all been made from reindeer hide and reindeer skins, et cetera, et cetera. What you see on the gentleman in blue is the Karokino Gokti, and this is Johan. And he and his wife, Barrett Ann, with another couple, own this compound. So here he is explaining to me what good swimmers reindeers are. And because their hair is hollow, makes them very buoyant. So when you see photos or videos of reindeers having to cross rivers in order to get to summer pastures, they are really, really good swimmers that way. So he was telling me about that. I am in a Gore-Tex suit because I didn't think my down stuff was going to be warm enough. But you can also see a really beautiful, to the right, a beautiful holder for an infant made out of reindeer skin, and some beautiful band weaving, which is another part of the craft. The next slide will show you something that is really unique. This gentleman, this is his coat from when he was a young man, that his mother made for him for his confirmation. And this is made out of white reindeer hide, which, as I understand, is when reindeer are born, they're all white. So the reindeer are slaughtered young in order to get this very, very white coat. And you can see all the different variations of beautiful trims and band weaving, and then also some nice tassels on that as well. So, and you can see, again, notice his belt down here. at the very right below everything. I was told by someone that a lot of reindeer herders, when they wear these belts that have silver plaques on them, they push them down really low to kind of indicate how heavy the silver is, which will show that you've got a lot of reindeer and you're very wealthy. So let's go to the next slide. And this is a picture of the Jack, our guide on the left. And he's wearing a nice wool outfit, and you can kind of see his silver pin there. But Barrettes is the wife, and she is wearing a very large rescue, as you can see. And it's good to see these pieces on their own, technically, because you can study them up close, but even better to see them on the person, because I think you need to get an idea of the sheer size and diameter of the type of jewelry that it goes with these particular outfits. So let's go to the next one here. That was my National Geographic best photo I ever took of being outside. So everything was perfect there, but this was sort of our little farewell for the long day that we spent. But just, again, an incredible immersive experience, and I highly recommend it if you are ever that way. All right. So let's go to our next slide. So now we come round the bend here to actually talk about what about the silver, the jewelry, et cetera, et cetera. This is a view from our apartment in Caldacino. So from Alta, we drove to Caldacino, which was about 3 hours away. And this is inland. So we went from the coast to the tundra. And this, again, a beautiful, very kind of like sacred landscape to the people that live there. Very faintly on the left, you can see sort of two little bumps, which are two very sacred landscape pieces to the Sami that lived there. And as we go to the next slide, one of the things, as far as my fellowship is concerned, was to visit cultural institutions and repositories, which would mean visiting museums, interviewing artists, silversmiths, and talking to craftsmen. So I have kind of an older, this is from a book that is at the Vesterheim, but I wanted to kind of give you an idea of like how the whole Sami silver tradition didn't necessarily come about, but how it actually started or progressed. And we all know, and I think that we kind of underestimate the mobility of medieval man and ancient man in general. It's like how people got around. It's kind of amazing. And with that, how much trade would go on between groups. Very interesting. So if somebody was coming along, trading coffee or trading ribbon or all sorts of things, there might be spoons, utensils, et cetera, et cetera. And while the Sami themselves early on had no use for a spoon, they were an incredible trade item and something worth having. Let's see. So Andrew, you say that I have some questions about individual what here? I'm just going to look. Did you want to interject that in there?
I was just going to say, I forgot to say at the beginning that if people have questions about specific slides, if they want to just make a note of the little slide number that's in the bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, sure.
Then we can pop that image back up at the end when we're doing questions.
Yeah, and please know that I'm going to try to leave a really good chunk of time for questions because I'm sure people will have them.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
So here are some examples of very early spoons, and you can kind of see like at the lower spoon, like at the very bottom, you can kind of see like the sort of like it was very well loved and used, but you can get a sense of the craftsmanship and some of the symbols and some of the design work that is like very specifically what we would call Sami design. So let's go to the next slide here. And the thing is that with the Sami people coming in contact with traders from Norway and different parts of Russia, Finland, and Sweden, oftentimes they would want to commission spoons using their own iconography, or they would commission spoons with different sorts of, for instance, the spoon in the center has a twisted handle or a forged handle. But then again, you see all this really beautiful sort of incising work. And I know that the slide doesn't necessarily, they can't like zoom in really, really close, but there is a sort of like engraving technique where there's like little zigzags involved. And I'll give you a good idea of what that entails. But it's a very, very old use of an engraving tool, which is, again, you will see it in a lot of Sami design work. And I'm going to read something to you, which is, it was better said than me trying to redo it, out of one of the very oldest books regarding Sami silver. There hasn't been a lot of information or research as far as written, but there was a woman, Phoebe Failstrom, who published a book in 1962 called Lops Silver, where she went through and basically categorized cups, spoons, pins, brooches, buttons, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just going to read this to you verbatim, and this is her quote. "The origin of silver adornment regarding the development of Sami traditional clothing is as unique as it is complex. Historically, silver objects were popular trade items among the Norwegians and various Sami groups. Since the Sami possessed no silver traditions of their own, they would often commission local Norwegian silversmiths to create drinking vessels, ornaments, and spoons of specific design." And let's see. And it also states here that the oldest hallmarked item is a spoon created by a Bergen silversmith during the period of 1631 to 1668. And coincidentally, it's not until the final decades of the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century that Swedish silversmiths' work intersected with Sami culture, where they became the predominant creators of Sami silver objects. So let's go to the next slide here, if we can. And here you can kind of see a photograph of like basically the types of things that would have been commissioned. So you have silver spoons, you've got buttons, you've got pins, you've got cups, you've got little wine cups there. And things that they would be making or were, again, they relied on reindeer as far as their economy, would have been made in bone and antler, were now being transferred into silver versions of things that they had. So let's go ahead and go to the next one here. Yeah, and here are some for people who could not afford to collect silver, which to a nomad or a person leading a nomadic way of life is a very portable thing to have with you. You can pack it up and take it with you. Doesn't weigh a lot. It's good for trade. It's good for money. But here are some examples for people who were like basically wanting to imitate and or make spoons if they were not able to afford silver. And those are some examples on the right. And these are from the Rideau Museet in Kautokeino. And the slide on the left, or the picture on the left, I couldn't help myself because this is a what I call a Sami Swiss Army knife, because literally this piece you would attach to your belt and you would have your scissors, a spoon. The piece third from the right is actually a needle case with that little round medallion. If you pull that down, that would be a place that you would keep your needles. And then a very small little knife on the left. So if any of you know anything about Victorian jewelry and what a chatelaine is very much the same thing, but the Sami version of it. And again, you had to carry everything with you. So this would be a very important piece for you to have when you were hurting. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, something else that would have been a popular trade item would have been these little like silver balls that you can kind of see near the baby's face in the cradle there, near the band weaving. And Andrew, I'm going to have you go to the next one right away so we can get a close-up on this. These balls have been around since medieval times and are very significant in that they were charms against evil and sickness. And part of my research indicates that they were also around during the Black Death. So this was something that people would have as a charm against illness, but also a charm against the Huldra folk, or the hidden people, coming and exchanging your baby with one of their babies. And on this slide, this is actually a bridal collar where you can see sort of the stacking up of different silver items. And at the very top, you can see these silver balls that have like these dangling leaves and rings. And in the next slide, you'll get a little bit more of a close-up. The slide on the left is a really nice example of these are called a Comsakula, or a cradle ball. And the one on the left is from the Vesterheim Permanent Collection. And then I also took the liberty of showing some examples from Yule's Silver Gallery in Kautokeino of some of the different styles that they use. And some of them copy historical pieces completely. And then others will have kind of like the artist twist on it. But you can see that there are lots of different variations to these, and they have been around a long time. So again, very portable, something that people could take with them, and also a wonderful protective device, as well as a show of wealth. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in Kautokeino, that is the largest concentration of museums, institutes, school, silversmiths in the area. And so this was a place I spent a lot of time. The majority of our time there was spent at Kautokeino and also in Karjak. This is at the Sami Museum. And this is an outfit, the blue of the northern Sami. And I want to just give you an idea. The left is the woman's costume, of course, and the right is the gentleman's costume. And please take note of the incredible amounts of pleats, both on his gakti top and her dress. This is yards and yards and yards of fabric with lots of trim. So the more you could afford, the more you could put on, the fancier you could be. And if we go to the next slide here, I'm going to have you go. There's a little bit of a close-up of the gentleman's outfit here. Give you an idea of the trim. Photo's a little dark. I apologize for that. Some limitations taking photos in the museum. But let's go to the next one, which will give you a kind of a good detail view of the women's. Again, just for the sake of diameter, the pin at the top, the brooch at the top, is actually an older style pin, and the one at the bottom is a little more modern here. And you can kind of see just, again, the dimensions against that. They are much, much larger. So, and the reason why, the thing is that if you have more money to spend, you can go big or you can go home. So we're going to get a little bit more into that later. So let's go on to the next slide here. We're going to go through these a little more quickly. This is the interior of the museum in Kautokeino, so you can see some really beautiful versions of sleds. And this was particularly interesting because they were also used as coffins once in a while. So it was like a double use sort of thing. You can use it in your lifetime and also use it in your death. Let's go to the next slide. They had a really lovely display of older Sami silver, which includes these belts. And I talked to you a little bit about the belts before. These are a lot older, but you can see different shapes here, squares and circles. And one of the smiths told me that there's a reason for that people who are married can wear square pallions on their belts, and people who are unmarried wear round. People who are unmarried do not get to wear squares. But if you're married, you can also mix the squares and the circles up together. So there are a few rules as far as the use of the silver and how it's used, very much like the Norwegian, where it's like there's certain silver that goes with certain regions, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to find that there aren't too many rules except for this one. And let's go to the next one. I think is probably one of my favorites, because anybody who knows me knows I love crowns so hard. And this is a beautiful Sami bridal crown that is on loan to the museum in Kautokeino by the silversmith Franz Singer, who actually has his studio right next door to the museum. So this is a piece that a person can rent and wear if they would like to. But again, the design elements are very different. This is almost sort of like a tiara. Let's go to the next one here. I think I have a detail of it. Oh, no, let's go back. Andrew, sorry. Yeah, these have everything. There is actually those little round discs, they move. So when the bride is moving, she's not only sparkling, she's also making lots of musical sound. And I had no idea before this trip that there was also a crown tradition or with the Sami bridal customs. So if you go to the next photo now, this was a photo that I got, and this is a black and white of turn of the century. And you can see the bride they're obviously both Sami people, and he has a beautiful tin thread collar, and she has a beautiful bridal collar that if I could get a close up on this, all that detail and decoration that you see is all silver. So this was like something I think that caught on, just like everything else does with jewelry. It's a trend. It's trending on Instagram. So let's go to the next slide. It was also Easter weekend, as I mentioned. And so they had a nice fair outside, which was really wonderful. And of course, this lots of, you can see reindeer skins for sale there and antlers, but then also the beautiful hook-toed boots, which are really interesting because all of these they're still making these. The lady in the booth there makes these year round. So they had got to eat some local herring and take in some of the local craft there. And then let's go to the next slide. And now we get into the area of where I actually had set up interviews with local silversmiths in the Kautokeino area. The first people that I spoke to were Anita Schmidt and Peter Roost. And this is a couple. Their silversmithing studio is within eyesight of the museum as well. And they are both two people from Switzerland who arrived in Kautokeino in like the 80s. So they are contemporary artists in their own right, but also being silversmiths and goldsmiths, catering to the local community's needs. So they are makers of Sami silver. And I will tell you that we were really super fortunate to get there the weekend that we did because they were retiring Easter Saturday. So we are the last people to have gotten a wonderful recording and interview with them before they retired. Let's go to the next slide here. And so we got a little tour of their studio, which looks a lot like my studio, lots of projects going on. And let's go to the next one here. And now you can kind of see like how some of these pieces actually start to become constructed. They're very large pieces of silver. Things are done in stages. And if you can take note of the large piece that's right forefront, there's a kind of a zigzag pattern on there. And I believe in the next slide, Andrew, I think that's the one with the video. This is, if we can hit that. This is Anita demonstrating how they get that zigzaggy pattern. So she uses a small chisel. And then this is something that is very specific and unique to the Sami silver. You will see this used a lot. So let's go to the next one. And here are some of their orders that people were picking up that day. So they were really pushing people to come in on Easter Saturday to pick up the work. And there are like 3 major silversmiths in Kautokeino. And I asked them, I was like, how is it that they can support three smiths in this place? And I was told that oftentimes people will commission new pins every year, which is amazing. And something that's interesting about the styles of the pins is that regardless of what group you're from, there's relatively 9 groups of Sami, that the pins themselves, they kind of float. They float between the different outfits. So there's not like a hard line as to this pin has to go with this and those colors have to go with this. And if we go to the next slide here, one of the things that they told me, as I said, well, how do you keep the young people interested? And they laughed and they said, well, we do some things that we might not necessarily want to do, which is like we would use colors that we don't normally use. The traditional colors are usually red or green, very much like in the Scandinavian or Norwegian Norwegian pieces, red and green, but they have started to use Swarovski crystals. So they are like, well, if we're going to keep the young people interested, then we better start using some of the things that they like. So let's go to the next slide. And you can see I've got two pins here, and the one on the left, they call it unicorn colors, because this is relatively not necessarily new, but these color combinations are not what you would consider traditional. And the pin on the right, a little more traditional in the way that it's using red. Red or green is what they would have used. So it would have been garnet and another green stone. So again, pieces that were on their way out the door the day that we were there. So lucky to have photographed them. So let's go to the next one. While I was there visiting Peter and Anita, someone who's a friend of theirs, this is Anu Forsilius. She is a silversmith as well, and she has a shop in Eastern Finnmark, and she is a maker of Sami silver here. And she is not of Sami descent. She is actually Finnish, but she took her schooling in Finland, and literally this is like her life's work of what she does. And if we go to the next slide, she is the one that told me a bit about the belts as far as the squares and the circles. So you can see here wonderful variations, but sort of like aurora borealis crystals in the upper left. We've got some bright oranges, something a little more traditional in the center. And then again, a crown in the lower left. So this is something else that's part of the bridal accoutrement when women get married, if they decide they would like to use it. So let's go to the next one here. These are some of her belts. The photo in the upper right is actually a Yule's Silver Gallery photo of a bridal couple that we looked at the beginning of the talk, but you can see him wearing his belt there. And you can see the more silver plaquettes or plaques that you can buy, the wealthier you look, the heavier the belt is. And you can see the incredible detail on these. And the round for the unmarried and square for the married. And sometimes combinations of both only if you're married. So this gentleman already has his married belt on in the upper right corner there. All right, let's go to the next one here. Right across from Peter and Anita's studio, everything was so centrally located, it was great, is the Duji Institute of Kautokeino. And this is an actual school. Duji refers to the handcraft of the Sami, which includes wood carving, bone carving, silversmithing, reindeer skinning, hide, all of those handicrafts. And they were actually having an exhibition that day of some of the student work. So on the left, a really beautiful, I always focus in on the silver, but in conjunction with the white reindeer dress and coat are just absolutely stunning, all handmade silver. And then on the right, a reindeer pouch. And again, you can kind of see that little Comsakula, that little ball here hanging from it. And just a really great opportunity to see artists there with their work. So if we go to the next slide, this is actually one of the artists. She was 65. And Christine, she had said that she had been a silversmith since she was 22. So she actually, we think in terms of like handicraft, like how does it evolve when people are doing a certain type of thing, how much of an individual narrative the artist can have. Well, here is a really wonderful example, because what you see on the left are these like little sort of O-rings that work as stoppers on the lassos or the ropes that they use to capture the reindeer. And she's chosen to take that design and actually translate that into a silver earring pattern, which is, I just think, incredible. So I'll go to the next slide there, and we can see that, yeah, this is how it actually works in reality. But someone's taking something that's a utilitarian item and actually elevating it to a precious metal and also a very unique piece of adornment, which I love. So let's go to the next one here. All right. So the other silversmith and the first silversmith to arrive in Kautokeino in the 50s was Frank and Regina Jules. And this is an incredible place, not just inside, but outside. This is just like the jewel of the tundra. is what I call it, but this is the actual silversmithing studio. So let's go to the next slide here. And I want to give you a little bit of background about this couple. Frank is from Denmark and Regina is from Germany, and both arrived in the 50s, very attractive to the nomadic way of life. And Regina was actually 18 years old. And she read everything that she could about the Sami people that was available. And then also she took a job as a maid for a Sami family and learned a lot about the culture. And then she and Frank met. And Frank was a bit of a handyman. Let's go to the next slide here. And so he'd fix a lot of stuff, but then the local Sami population would bring them things to fix, like jewelry. So they went ahead and opened up a jewelry studio and became the first to actually start creating work for the local Sami population per their requests. Let's go to the next slide here. So as you walk into their studio, all along the walkway here, they give you a history of this. So it's old photographs, and you can see all the local ladies here lining up to either to pick up or look at work. And then let's go to the next one too. And this is the close-up. This is Frank, and he's actually, this is a vintage photograph of him giving the groom who's getting married a large brooch that he made. So, and if you go to the next one, we're going to have that bridal couple again here. So it's not the same gentleman, but again, I just see the sheer size of these items are just incredible. And there was a really unique sort of synergy that Sonova, who is the daughter that runs the business now, talked to me about, as far as people being able to be one-on-one with the smith and put in their ideas and their personal requests for how they wanted something made. And if you've ever had any custom work done, like here in the United States, you don't really necessarily get to talk to the goldsmith right up front. So this was a very unique sort of interchange, and then one where you could actually listen to what people really wanted. So let's go to the next slide. This is an interior of their studio. I wish mine looked like this. It's a lot messier than that, but beautiful windows looking out over the yard. And then we'll go to the next one, Andrew. And on the back wall there, you can see examples. You can see examples of pieces that they recreate. So these are the patterns. And then also you can see all the scads of silver wire. I mean, everything is just so beautifully displayed. It's breathtaking. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Again, I feel like this is such a short amount of time to tell you just how incredibly fantastic all of this is. And the Silver Gallery itself is not just a sales place, but it is also an incredible museum. So Frank and Regina actually collected a lot of the older Sami pieces, and there's some beautiful prints there. They have lovely examples of very old historical things that some of the more modern things are based on. So here you can see a very interesting backdrop of prints of Sami culture, and then also to some of their inventory, which is breathtaking as well. Let's go to the next slide. This is a close-up of some pieces where they've actually taken something that might be a brooch, and these are actually hair pieces. So these are barrettes. So there's room to actually move some of these older types of designs into something a little more modern that we can use every day. So I was happy to own one of these. So if we go to the next one, I believe we might be at the video. Oh, nope, this picture. Okay, so this is Regina Yules on the left, me in the center, and this is Sonova, her daughter, who runs the business. And they were so nice to let us interview them and talk with them, and just the kindest, nicest people. So now I think the next one is the video. Nope. This is, okay. So, here, back up. You can back up. That's okay. So Sonova took me through A to Z, their entire place. So we were there for a whole entire day. So we were looking at contemporary work. She is also a silversmith and an artist in her own right. And her mother is also a silversmith and contemporary artist, as well as someone who made Sami silver. So yeah, now let's go to the next one, Andrew. Sorry. And you can just run the video. The dialogue isn't all that important, but again, just to hold one of these pieces and feel how heavy they are.
To the chair.
Because if you've ever bought any like Norwegian silver, sometimes there's a difference between the weight of things. This is really nice and heavy because back in the day you'd have to weigh silver and it had to be what you said it was and be worth what you said it was. But these are really beautifully made pieces. So now let's go to the next bit. And yeah, let's run the video.
No, if you like, for instance, this size, but you like this middle part better, we can do that. Or if you like this middle part, but you want 2 rows with smaller leaves, we can do that. You know, we would say this to people so that they know that, okay, I don't have to stick to this. So I like this size.
And I ordered a hairpiece from you at Christmas for myself, and I was amazed that someone sent me and said, "What color stones do you want?" And I was like, "I get a choice."
Yeah.
So that was exciting.
Yeah. And you know, this makes it fun also for young people. For young people to have their idea, to have their choice, not to have to do like their grandmother did, you know. And what I always say and what I love to say is that there are so many things in the Sami culture, like this with the jewelry, which is very traditional, extremely traditional, but not conservative. And when can you ever say this in one sentence? That something is traditional, but not conservative. You can never say that. Because traditional is kind of equality to conservative. It means that, okay, then it's stuck.
There's no room.
Yeah. But here there is room. And that makes it a joy for people to wear the Sami clothing. But I dare to say today, even though my parents have gone through many states that has been difficult, I dare to say today, and it's a bit bold to say, that if my mother and father wouldn't have come exactly when they came, maybe they would have come 15 years later. It would probably have been too late. And this would never happen. Because they came right after, in a way it was right after the Second World War. Kautokeino was kind of forgotten and lost, like many small places around here, because there were no road. People wouldn't travel as they did. Then suddenly more and more contact with Alta and other places came. The plastic came, Tupperware. These beautiful things would be thrown out because they were unpractical, you know. Wearing the costume was a bit unpractical in a way. The snow scooter came after some time. It was easier to have a Gore-Tex suit on. All these things could have made it difficult to think about actually keeping the old clothing. But so I don't say that my parents are the reason for people keeping the clothing, but since the jewelry could start all over again and it could become Sami, not only something that the traders took with them, but people could decide what they wanted, like they started with. They could also start to decide, I would like some more patterns on my dress. I want it a bit broader. Now I can actually buy some ready-made threads from the south, and why not? I can put them together in a nice pattern, and I can have some nice silks on, and then, you know, a whole kind of thing about thinking out a personal way, what I like, what I think is beautiful, came through. And I think that the hummus to do that was there because the jewelry could develop. And maybe it wouldn't have been there so strongly if it wouldn't have started with the jewelry.
That is so correct.
And I don't say that it's because of them, but it's because of people like them.
Awesome. Terrific. Yay. So I see, Andrew, we're kind of running out of time. So do you think that we should stop there and then take some questions?
I think we should plan to go over by 10 or 15 minutes.
Is that okay?
There are some really good questions that we're going to want to throw to you. And folks, if you need to log off because you have a hard end time of 5 minutes from now, we will be adding the recording of this to the YouTube channel in a couple weeks for Vester time. So we certainly don't want to cut this short. This is just fascinating.
I have somebody saying, please go overtime. I'm like, all righty. And here I am. All right. So again, this was probably like the pinnacle, like a very wonderful point. High point as far as the trip. So what I'm going to show you next is basically we went and we saw the rest of their complex where we looked at the contemporary jewelry. So we can kind of go through this a little more quickly. You go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead. So you can see that this is all, and the display is just beautiful. We can go to the next slide here. And the last stop for us was in Karajak, which is home to the Sami, one of the Sami parliaments. And this is actually the Sami Museum there. Because of COVID, certain aspects of the museum were closed, but we still got to see some really great things. So let's go to the next slide. And this is, again, I was like, oh, wow, this whole crown thing is pretty amazing. But go to the next slide so we can get a detail of like the workshop there. The center had a wonderful workshop and somebody was there working and making beautiful things. Next slide. This is a detail of the bridal crown in the case. And you can see it's very similar to the one earlier that I showed in the presentation, everything, but using like the blue and the red and lots of moving, beautiful parts to this. But again, this would fit over the cap. So next slide. And this is a nice risque that has, it's a little bit older, and those little donuts are actually glass. And so instead of using like sets or stones, these are actually red, green, and blue glass, which is, and then some really nice filigree work on this. And let's go to the next one. And of course, we had to make a stop at the Sami Parliament. So here I am on the back side, overcast day. And in the next slide, you can actually see this is the actual Parliament chambers, the Parliament building. And the next slide kind of shows it's a much larger complex. And entrance is sort of this big long corridor right there. And you can kind of see the lavu sort of inspired structure poking up from the back. And yeah, they are glass beads. They are glass beads. A big trade item. So let's go to the next one. And the reason I wanted to stop at the Parliament is because not only is this where the Sami legislation goes on and all of their meetings, but they have an incredible library there, which is open to the public. So I got access to some really wonderful, wonderful books. Not all of them were written in Swedish, Finnish, or Sami. Some were in English. So if we go to the next slide, I was able to actually get some good background on some older pieces and some design aspects, which I hope I can talk about in another talk. And then also lots of periodicals and reference material for a Zuji, for the other crafts that are going on. Let's go to the next one here. Now, I mentioned that one of the big things when you travel, like you take little side steps and like little fun, magical, serendipitous things happen. Well, one thing that was really disappointing is once we got to Sami Parliament, our guide that was going to take us around got COVID. So it was still very much a COVID time. So we were not able to go into the Sami chambers because there's this big, beautiful blue backdrop of a sacrificial stone sort of inspired motif by a really famous artist. And I had wanted to get in there and to see that. Well, as luck would have it, while I was in Kautokeino, next to the museum, there was a little contemporary art show. And I met this wonderful artist, and her name is Hilda Peterson. And she's standing next to, she's a multimedia artist as well as a person versed in traditional crafts. But this is her installation called Magic Carpet. And these are all plastic pill packs that she has made into an incredible installation. And as you can see, she's got like a rescue, but it's an actual, it's made out of fabric. And she, if you go to the next slide, she is the artist who did this. So I had to get this photo from online, but I actually got to meet her and talk with her. And she's an internationally acclaimed person and just so unassuming and so nice. So the fact that I couldn't get into Parliament and I actually got to meet the artist, it was an okay trade-off. It really was. But this is actually inside the chambers. So when they present, this is their backdrop. And it's a beautiful contemporary piece of using ancient symbology. Yeah, it is even better. So let's go to the next slide here. And of course, we're coming to the end of my presentation, but you could not get out of Finnmark without having to dig your car out a couple times. So we did that a couple times, and I had to get my husband in the act. And something else too is that even though we were only there 3 weeks and it was hardly any time to like scratch the surface of all this incredible information, but you meet such incredible people. And one thing I just absolutely love about being an artist and then folk art educator is to meet other folk artists. So you might know Laura Ricketts, who is a fabulous knitter and a purveyor of Sami mitten patterns, et cetera, et cetera. She had taken the same sort of trip that I wanted to do. So she was intrinsic in hooking me up with people while I was there. So if you go to the next slide, let's see, we had the great pleasure to meet Gerlinda Thiessen, who is the woman in the raspberry colored top, and her partner, Bernd. Gerlinda is a master goldsmith from Germany who happened to work at Yule's at one time. And her partner is a very gifted Duji master and also musician and yoiker and wood carver and just everything. And they were so nice and so helpful. And if any of you watch Norwegian television or any series, if you're familiar with like the Beforeigners, or now there is a new movie coming out with Sonja Janak called Unborn Biru, you will see her props there. She is a person who works a lot with the theaters, has worked with PBS on a lot of the Viking and some of the historical programming that you see on TV. So just a really awesome serendipitous get together and rallied by Laura Ricketts, who I will forever be indebted to for letting me like follow sort of her path and getting me set up. So thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we're going a little bit over time here. You are my first presentation, folks, so I see that I will probably need to like be cutting it short or like moving this into another presentation, but I wanted to leave some time for questions. So
absolutely. I mean, I think we are delighted that you went a bit over because I think everybody here was loving getting to learn from you. So we have several questions that have come in through the Q&A and a couple that have come in the chat as well. Greg, you've got the first question.
Yes, I have a couple questions about the same thing from different viewers. Where did the Sami people get their silver? Did they mine it themselves or did they trade for it?
No, they did not mine it themselves. And it would actually be something that would be traded. Something that I should make clear is that, again, the Sami had no tradition of their own that way. So if they were wanting silver items, they would be commissioned through trade. Now we do have some Sami artists who are silversmiths, and actually, and a lot of them are in Sweden. There's a few in Norway that are doing silversmithing because it's actually also part of the Duji practice is to do some silversmithing. So, but no, they did not mine their own. However, I will say that silver was discovered in Finnmark, and the Sami do not want people to dig for it. So most of the silver came from the West Coast, Kongsberg, where those mines are.
Excellent. Good. Another question that we got from several different folks is about the Duji practice and tradition and the conversation about what is appropriate for Sami folk to do, how much of that information is considered to be Americans and non-Sami artists can do. I mean, you were talking about some Finnish artists and German artists who clearly have pretty great expertise. But can you talk a little bit more about the conversation that's happening about which things are exclusively for the Sami as indigenous people and which traditions are more open for outside artists?
It's a really good question. And I'm glad somebody asked that, because that's always kind of the elephant in the room. And I know a lot of people, like with 23andMe and all that, we're finding, all kinds of like connections to ethnic groups, like through our DNA and that sort of thing. But as it was explained to me and through my research is that you have to have a very clear lineage and connection to a lineage and a family name in order to be able to wear the gakti. And to wear some of the other pieces. The thing is that those are very specific to the different ethnic groups as well. It is not a costume that people can put on, and probably what's a little more floating is the jewelry. The jewelry, because the thing is that that is something that is like basically that wasn't necessarily culturally and historically intrinsic in the Sami adornment, but it has worked its way in from southern Norway up. But because of that sort of like what I always like to call that trade and artistic interchange, is that they took something, which might have been a little more southern culture and made it their own. And again, very one-on-one with, how big or how small. And again, anybody who's taken any classes in filigree work, for like telemark and Hallingdal, there's very specific design parameters. And it's like you wear this silver with this, and this goes with this. And now there's a little easing of that. The Bunad police can't have it all their way, where you can like mix pieces, like say if your mother, it's a piece from your mother's side of the family and she's not from that area, you can mix those together. But as far as the gakti goes, that is only for people that can trace lineage, have connections. And in some cases, there are people that even if you're Sami, if you don't speak Sami, they don't consider you Sami. So there's a lot of sort of like elements that as long as people are empathetic to that, and it's not culturally appropriation, but more appreciation and stuff like that. I guess that's the long answer to a short question. But
no, I think that's a really great answer for the wearing of the things. Is there a similar conversation happening about the making of things? Doing the silversmithing in a Sami inspired approach or something like that?
I guess I would need to find out more about that. I know that there are younger silversmiths who are Sami. Like I said, Anu Forsilius, the woman who made all, the belts. We talked about the belts. The Finnish woman, she said that it's the most of those people or younger people, they're like more centrally located in Sweden, not so much northern, but there are a few, but people have to go away and take school and then come back for it. So I do know, like the Sami University, they have a program for that. And so, again, exclusivity of it is something that I'd have to investigate because, again, it has grown out of something that was a trade item,
Right.
which is not necessarily, again, historically intrinsic to their traditions, but that got kind of like absorbed and moved in. And people are taking it and doing very beautiful contemporary things as well, drawing on those design elements and doing something that's very specifically, if they're Sami, it's their voice.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. So speaking of the belts, Greg, you had a question that came in about the detail work on these belts.
Yes. So on slide 43, there was a round square silver belt pieces. Are these also used in Norwegian bunad jewelry? Would you know about that?
Oh, yes, I would, because we have a similar, and I say we because like my mother's family is from Hallingdal, and there's that bridal tradition of like a bridal belt full of like plaques like this, silver or gold washed. And then also, a bridal pendant, a bridal bib, and a crown and that sort of thing. So this to me, I mean, in my own humble opinion, is that this is, again, something that someone saw. They thought, this is really cool, but I think we should do it this way. So these types of belts, I mean, if you would, again, just go online and look up like, Norwegian bridal belt, you'll see like these square elements all lined up. Probably the example in the upper left-hand corner with the spoons, the sort of dangling little elements there. That's probably a little closer to like what you'd see on a regular Norwegian bridal belt, like say from Voss or some of the other places. But this is very specific because here it's like we probably are using like a reindeer leather. Again, they're taking elements that they like, putting it with something that is very specific, the elements or materials that they're familiar with. And then also too, there's a lot of artistic sort of like room for them to like do what they want to do, depending upon how much money you had or you would want to spend. So the bigger, the better, the more, the shinier. I mean, like, why not something bigger? But again, it is something that somebody saw and they're just like, here's what I want to do.
I believe I have one more question from the chat, and then I think there's a little small question I can squeeze in at the end.
Sure.
Besides using Swarovski crystals, are real gems ever used? From the panel, from the interview you got to do with the artist, and then also just a little check in because you talked with that artist. Do you know what medium they used to make that beautiful blue, or is that something that did not come up?
Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, traditionally they would have used something like garnets. And I do know that there are people that use garnets because it was something that was readily available. So again, even in the Vesterheim's collection, a lot of what we don't like to use the term semi-precious because everything is precious that comes out of the earth, but you see a lot of red stones used. And the other thing is that if they didn't have garnets, they'd want to use red glass. It was more about the color. And as far as like the colors that are chosen, the Swarovski crystals, I mean, that's pretty much the predominant thing that people are using right now. Again, I would have to do like more research into that. But I mean, this is the reason why they keep the youth sort of involved. So Swarovski crystals, they all come in all those different colors, and just technically or chemically, I don't know how they get those colors, but they can get any color they want. And so in order to like kind of keep moving, keeping the tradition breathing and moving along, stuff like that, there are sort of like little things you have to do, and like just to basically like tweak it a little bit to like be like, okay, it's still doing this, but we'll add your suggestion of like what kind of colors you want in there. But like technically, I don't know how crystals are made, but it's a good question because it's interesting that they're using crystals from Czechoslovakia in these pieces. So like, again, drawing elements from all over to get whatever that vision of that unique and personal voice is for them done.
Interesting. And what was the painting of the ceremonial stones? Was that a painting? Was that a sculptural installation? That artwork?
You know what? I would have to check on that. That okay. I think is it's not a textile, but I would have to ask, and I'm sure Laura Ricketts is going to be ringing me off the hook as soon as I'm off here. Everything, but it's an installation. I wanted to say that this was the reason I wanted to get in there. But I do believe it's a painting, but okay. I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me on that. But it was great to be able to meet the artist, and even if I couldn't see the actual work.